Here are the 10 best traps in the most aggressive chess opening, the Danish Gambit. The Danish Gambit is great if you are lazy, because here your opponent develops your pieces for you. And even though you sacrificed 2 pawns, but now you're way ahead in development, ready to go ahead and attack. It's considered to be not a very solid opening, and yet I'm a grandmaster and I'm still playing it a lot in Blitz. It's a lot of fun. Now here Black will usually develop his kingside pieces aiming to castle quickly, and I'm going to show you the main line, which I think illustrates perfectly some of the key attacking patterns here. So let's say Black develops a bishop, also pinning your knight, you develop, and at this point, as always here, they'll always be annoyed by your pawn pushing forward and chasing away this knight from f6. One of the easiest solutions for Black seems to be to just take this pawn while making use of the pin. But now as you castle, your knight is free to go, and therefore his central knight is hanging. He wants to trade it off. And the beauty of the position is that you're already winning. There's already no way back for Black. For example, if he castles, you go knight to d5, striking and attacking his bishop, but also opening up a diagonal for your bishop. And now your opponent is going to learn the power of your 2 Danish bishops the hard way. You go knight f6, checking the king. Notice that the knight is guarded by the bishop. For this reason, he cannot capture it with a queen, it would lose the queen. But otherwise, this capture would open up the king, and you just go ahead and continue attacking with this check. Then queen h4 takes aim at this pawn on f6, you're threatening to capture it with a double attack to his king and queen. Bishop e7 is forced, trying to guard the pawn, but now bishop d3 finally overpowers Black. Queen takes h7 is coming, and there is no way for Black to cover this diagonal because he can't push the pawn forward because that pawn is also pinned by the other bishop of yours. Let's say your opponent tries to be careful and he tries to restrict you. He goes d6 to take control of this square, and then after you develop your knight, he plays bishop g4, pinning the knight. It looks like now your opponent is totally secure, right? Wrong, because you still sacrifice one of your Danish bishops. But what for? It's unclear what you're going to play here, but it is a very satisfying move. Just think about this. He played d6 to make it impossible for you to go there. He then pinned your knight so that your knight cannot move. And yet you play the move that goes against all the odds, knight to e5. You ignore the pin, you ignore the fact that your knight can't be captured, but this move is still brilliant. It checks his king, but he cannot take the knight because his pawn is pinned. In that case, he's going to lose the queen, which means that he can't do that and the king needs to move. But in that case, your knight retreats back, grabs the bishop, and this little combo allows you to totally open up his king. Now you simply want to castle, open up the e-file, and win the game. If he tries to develop, then after this trade, the attack goes on. He can't recapture with the queen still because of your bishop. And as the pawn recaptures, you just keep attacking, queen h5 check, and then once again your Danish bishop strikes with this little sacrifice, and thanks to this cure, you're still winning his queen. Obviously, your opponent can play some other moves, but it's never easy for him. In this case, you can kick out the knight, and if he tries to pin the pawn because otherwise retreating the knight doesn't sound good, then you can do the same move, symmetric, unpinning your pawn, and therefore finally the knight now has to move. You take away all these squares, therefore the knight has to go backward, and now you develop a knight, he does the same, and boom, he's already done. The queen has to go back and protect that pawn on c7, but now you land your knight on f6 and you win once again. Actually, the thing that helped me realize that this gambit is really strong is the fact that I would love Indian food more than Indian defense. But at the same time, I'd still take the Danish gambit over Danish pastry. Like, I don't know about you, but to me that sounds like a solid argument. Here Black needs to capture the knight one way or the other, but then it opens up this discover check, and once Black covers anyhow, you capture the bishop, and then your sniper bishop hunts the rook and wins the game. And now we're getting to the favorite part of the Igor Nation, taking souls, because I literally cannot imagine your opponent recovering from this. He goes bishop b4, checking your king, I think is the most played move actually, and then he develops his knight to f6, potentially attacking this pawn and hoping to castle, but it's not going to be that simple. You push the pawn forward, attacking the knight. Your opponent is still optimistic, he sees that the knight can actually move forward, taking advantage of the pin and attacking your knight. He thinks that it'll win him time to castle his king to safety, but as always there's gonna be some unpleasant surprise. You sacrifice the bishop on f7, and that is the first in the long series of unpleasant surprises for your opponent. After the king moves, you continue with the queen b3, double attack. It's actually a very common tactical pattern in the Danish Gambit where you sacrifice the bishop temporarily and then thanks to this double attack you get it back right on the next move while exposing your opponent's king. Now, since he needs to cover the king somehow, d5 is the move that makes a lot of sense, that blocks the diagonal, that solidifies this knight on e4, that opens up this diagonal for the bishop, all that good stuff. Your opponent clearly expects you to capture the bishop, but you play the other move. Another unpleasant surprise for your opponent. You play the en passant capture, which renews the very same check. Your opponent is annoyed and still covers his king, and finally you are kind enough to capture the bishop. His knight in the middle of the board is hanging, but he's fine with that. He's capturing that knight, definitely expecting you to recapture. But as always in this line, we're not going to. You play queen f4 check, which is actually a brilliant idea. The black king needs to move. Notice that he can't cover because of your bishop. Same to other variations. Therefore, once the king moves, now you still don't take this knight, you play another unexpected move, pawn captures c7, this time with a double attack to his queen and knight. Moreover, due to this x-ray from your queen, he really needs to keep guarding this knight. The queen cannot just move anywhere, because then you're going to promote and win a ton of material. Therefore, he can't do that, which means that the queen needs to move somewhere along the last rank, let's say right here. And at this point, your opponent is 200% sure that you're going to capture one of his knights. And you still don't do that. You play the move that no one would even think about. That is the move queen to e5. You've been consistently ignoring your development. Your king is exposed. You totally abused the rule don't move the same piece twice in an opening. And yet your position is winning. With the queen e5 move, you threatened this checkmate. Black needs to do something about that. However, he still cannot move the queen away, as that would drop the knight on b8, and then he's going to lose the rook and a ton of material. Therefore, black still needs to do something about that. They may play bishop to d7, which looks like a creative solution. They're pinning your queen. But now you do the absolute unthinkable. You are going to pin the piece that pinned you. At this point, everyone is confused, yourself included, but nevertheless you win the game. So what's the catch here? If he captures the queen by the bishop, that loses the defense of his own queen, and you're going to capture it with a checkmate. But if instead he captures your queen by his queen, then your queen is no longer pinned, and you're free to go and to checkmate him. This whole thing is absolutely insane, and yet it's been played many times. Therefore, you really have a great chance of catching somebody very high rated with this trap. And by the way, if you want to learn how to find those tactical shots in your own games, not only while solving tactical drills, I've got a free masterclass about this. I'll drop a link down below, you can check it out later. There's a common question that people ask me, how about black simply trade off their dark square bishop? If this bishop is an issue, if at some point you're going to play queen b3 and hit it, how about black simply trade it off? In fact, it's actually a bad idea for black, because now you've got those two classical Danish Gambit bishops, which are absolutely monstrous, and there's nothing black can really oppose to it. Therefore, that's not such a simple solution for black. And right now, they've got to guard this pawn, so is their rook. If the knight goes, as always, you can push the pawn forward and kick it out. Your queen takes away these squares. If the knight comes here, again, there is this same bishop sacrifice with a very similar idea. This time, you're not playing queen b3 to double attack the king and the bishop because there is no bishop right here, but you play queen d5, and you also have a very similar double attack. Once the king moves, you get your piece back with interest. You grab this pawn f7. The king moved back and forth, therefore it lost the right to castle. It's going to stay there, and you've got an easily winning position. Basically, you're going to castle, play e6, and checkmate the king. After the initial check, which is the most played move, what if your opponent got sick and tired of defending all the time and he tries to counter-strike with queen to g5, which not only guards his own pawn on g7, but also hits your pawn on g2 and somewhat puts pressure to this knight on d2. Looks pretty cool at first, however, you stay cool and you just respond with your knight move, letting him capture this pawn, in fact even nudging him to do that. And from there are two possible lines. He can either capture the pawn right away or first take this knight with a check. If he captures a pawn, that's a lot of fun because now you go rook g1, hitting the queen, and then you continue with the very same bishop sacrifice. In this case, the situation is totally different, but you still follow up with a double attack and win the game. If instead black decides to take on d2 first, trying to simplify matters and trade off some pieces, you recapture. Now queen takes g2 looks perfectly safe for black. The rook is attacked, you can't even move here, there is no knight on f3 anymore, therefore if the rook is moved there, it's going to be captured. However, you play an absolutely fantastic queen h5. You're giving up that rook because you're going all in into your attack. And if black captures the rook or does anything else, the king moves and now black is in trouble. His queen is attacked. Notice that this pawn on e4 is defended, he can't take it. And then at the very same time, you're threatening queen takes f7 with a checkmate on the next move, which means that black is defenseless. Notice that g6 does not help. It's indeed a counterattack for one move, but your queen slides right here with a check, and on the next turn, you're going to capture his queen, you can capture this rook, his king is still very vulnerable, and you're going to win the game within a couple moves. Some people think that it's very easy to counter the Danish Gambit by simply giving up one of their extra pawns, but also to speed up their own development. In this case, you capture this extra pawn, and now c6 is very tempting. Black is hoping for your bishop to come back, and after that, they can trade queens and go into a winning endgame. But as always, there is an unpleasant surprise. This bishop sacrifice works once again. This time the purpose is totally different, but it still works. You distract the king, and now the queen is left hanging, you capture it and win the game. There is also one sophisticated way of playing the Danish Gambit unknown by most. It is when you first play knight to f3. And initially it seems like you're not playing a gambit, you're just playing some standard opening, you're going to play the Italian game. But then you transition into the Danish Gambit. And it may not seem clear what is really the difference, but the difference exists. The thing is, you included those two moves, knight f3 and knight c6, and it actually favors you most of the time, because typically, in the original Danish Gambit, black feels that their king is going to be in danger, and they try to prioritize their kingside development and to castle as quickly as they can. However, by including moves knight f3 and knight c6 up front, you made it harder for them to execute that plan. And for you, it's actually the opposite. You just speed up your development, and black is now already at a very big trouble. It's already extremely hard for black to survive right here. For example, any casual move, bishop c5, and that is it. Game over. You play e5, attack the knight. As the knight goes, you pull off the standard tactical idea, sack off the bishop, and then double attack, and now your opponent is destroyed. In a standard way, the king has moved, it can't castle anymore, and you're going to simply attack it, bring your rooks, bring your knight, break open, and win the game. Speaking about this more sophisticated line where you developed your kingside knight first before transitioning into the gambit, there's one more way for black to play, which is bishop b4 check and then knight to f6. It's actually very common for them to go into this line, and now you continue with the knight to d5 putting pressure. That also opens up your bishop to add even more pressure, and after the trade on d5, once again black is done. As you can see, it's very hard for black to pick correct defensive moves. And that is why, you shouldn't look at Stockfish telling you that black is fine, because they're only fine if they're able to find a long series of precise defensive moves, which is very hard for humans. Now the knight is attacked, it can't move in the center, there is your bishop there. If the knight moves back, you bring this battery, threatening checkmate. Now there's one cool line. If he's trying to blockade this diagonal, then he's facing another problem, this time from your light square bishop. It is a check. If the king moves, you're going to capture this knight and then continue your attack while having an extra piece. Therefore, let's take this back. This doesn't work for black. Otherwise, they still need to stop this checkmate. How about knight to f5? Looks good at first, but you continue with queen g4, threatening the knight. It cannot go away because it also has to guard this pawn on g7, and otherwise you'll simply checkmate black. d6 looks pretty good at first because their light square bishop is now active and defends the knight. However, you continue with bishop d3, attacking the knight once again. And if black does anything about that, well, actually there's not much they can do. Let's say pawn to g6. Now you reveal the second idea behind the move bishop d3. Not only it attacked the knight, it also revealed this discovered attack to their dark square bishop. You grab it, and now you're up a piece, plus his king is still extremely vulnerable. You're going to easily put up a battery along this diagonal, put a rook right here, and you're still having a winning attack plus an extra piece. If you want to improve your chess beyond opening traps, check out this free masterclass. And if you want to know best middle game strategy, this video covers just that.